JD Vance, in my view, is a con man, but he's a clever con man. Now, it's fair to say that he is different from Donald Trump. Firstly, and these sound like compliments, but they're part of the con. JD Vance is far more intelligent than Donald Trump. I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter who's more intelligent than Donald Trump. He's articulate. He's generally well-read. He understands to some extent, and I'm about to disprove what I'm about to say about this, but he understands the subjects that he's talking about. He knows how to communicate with people. He is capable of changing his mind rapidly, depending on the current situation and how much power he can wield as a result of those changes in perspective. He is able to have you believe that he knows the answers, that there is something that reflects his intelligentsia, which would have you believe that he is almost omniscient. That's how I see JD Vance. And I think he uses those skills in order to con you. But remember that this is the man who, back in 2016, actually said this about Donald Trump.
And so one of the takeaways is not just that the Republican Party base is somehow fundamentally flawed in a way that's unique in American political history. It's that Trump is a really bad candidate and, frankly, I think a really bad person.
So we all remember, well, we may not all remember, but this is who JD Vance was. He had identified the truth about Donald Trump, but because he had an opportunity to become the vice president and also potentially the president of the United States, those issues were abandoned. How his views of Trump changed, and now he's just become another sycophant for Trump and his administration. But is he really that smart? That is the question I'm going to put to you now, because I'm going to play a clip where JD Vance is endeavouring to be as much like Charlie Kirk as he can. So he's chosen to attend these rallies whereby he answers questions in the same way that Charlie did. The issue really is he that smart? Now, I'm going to play a clip which is relatively long, but it's got two elements to it. One in particular is about a discussion he has about religious freedom and the fact that, according to him, this is founded in Christianity. I'm going to do what I can to debunk that belief in just a moment, but I'll play what he says. And he does this rambling bit where, which I might delete, I don't know, about shaking the hands of some important people at some particular point. I think Hannity was one of those. And what that was like for him, and just encouraging people to feel free to have this conversation with him. Don't feel nervous about it and all this sort of stuff. So this is his effort to help people to feel relaxed in his presence, because he's such an awe-inspiring individual. So here he is at this particular meeting, and it's a turning point meeting, I think, and doing the Charlie Kirk thing.
JD Vance, good evening.
Thank you.
My question is, the Republican Party, they stand for the right to bear arms. A lot of things the Founding Fathers really made a priority.
Sure.
And I feel as if requiring Christianity in public schools goes against the Founding Fathers' wish of freedom of religion. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess, who is saying that we require Christianity in public schools?
Just from what I've seen on the media and the news, it seems like the Trump administration had wanted to make praying in schools and Christian values incorporated.
Well, look, I think Christian values are a good thing, and I'll talk to you about why I think that's a good thing. But that's separate from forcing people to pray, which I don't think that anybody, certainly no Christian that I know, would ever support or ever endorse. And let me just say something generally about all the people. I see there's a big line, and I hope I can get to everybody's question. I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, I went to an event at my church.
So I think this is an important tactic. So need to be wary of it. So the tactic is, while I'm formulating in my mind something that I need to argue intelligently, and that I need to, because I don't know at this particular point what I am arguing, so I'm going to put everything on hold, and I'm going to talk about something that's about my own personal experience, which I don't have to think all that much about, but which will endeavour to give me the space required to start to formulate the ideas and the thoughts that I need to formulate in order to ask the question. So that's what he's doing right now, and it's an interesting skill, actually, and he's got it pretty down pat, I think.
Which was a book signing with Oliver North and Sean Hannity, the Fox News host. And this was back before, this was, I guess, 25 years ago. And so neither of these guys was maybe as big as they are today. And I remember standing in line, and I'm about to say hello to Oliver North and Sean Hannity, and I remember thinking to myself, I was so nervous, all I need to do is shake their hand, give them a firm handshake.
Remember, this has got nothing to do with the questions that he was asked about praying in school, Christianity, the influence of Christianity in school, and particularly the Christian right, and their desire to have all schools with the Lord's Prayer and practicing Christianity as they think it should be practiced.
And tell them my name. That's what I'm thinking. Firm handshake, tell them my name. Firm handshake, tell them my name. And I get to the front of the line, and Sean Hannity looks at me, and he says, "How are you doing?" And I totally panic, and I go, JD. Because I had rehearsed shaking and saying my name. My point is, I admire your guys' courage, and please don't be nervous. If you need to work through a question, think about it, speak it. We're all here to have a nice conversation, and we're all supportive of it. Here's the thing when you talk about...
Okay, now that I've had time to think about my answer, here it comes.
I'm going to answer your question. Forcing Christianity, forcing people to pray. There's a liberal idea out there that I think is wrong, and that's that liberalism is the source of freedom of religion. And actually, if you go back to the original founding documents of the United States of America, if you go back to the Anglo legal tradition, well before there was ever a United States of America, what you find is that freedom of religion is actually a Christian concept. And the reason...
Don't you love the way he gets applause because he's just stated that that the freedom of religion is a Christian, is the foundation of Christianity, and Christianity informs us about freedom of religion. So this is, in his view, is where everything comes from. So what I'm about to discuss with you, though, will demonstrate that this is not true, because the idea of religious freedom, the right to practice any religion, as opposed to not practicing any religion, I guess, was first clearly advocated and put into practice by, and I'm going to get this name wrong because it's long, Zoroastrianism, under the rule of King Cyrus the Great, the King Cyrus the Great of the Achaemenid Empire. That is, and this was 6th century BCE. And so the Cyrus cylinder, often called the first chapter of human rights, dates to around 839 BCE. In it, Cyrus declares the freedom of conquered people to continue practicing their own religion and restore their temples and riches. Now, although this was the dominant religion of Persia, it did not enforce conversion. Instead, it recognized diversity as a strength. Now, there are other earlier examples of this as well, and Buddhism is one of them. That's in the 5th century BCE. While not explicitly advocating religious freedom as a doctrine, it spread peacefully and generally coexisted with other religions, especially during the period of Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE. And Hinduism is another one. It also tended to be inclusive rather than exclusive, though not necessarily framed in terms of freedom as we understand it today. So you can see that there were these other religions that impacted long before Christianity even appeared on the scene. Now, Cyrus' approach to religion not only influenced the ancient world, it later inspired Enlightenment thinkers and even the US Constitution's First Amendment. Not bad for a guy rocking a beard and sandals 2,500 years before it was cool. And I think that's worth noting that there were these other religions, these other set of beliefs that occurred long before what we saw, long before Christianity appeared. So this notion that he wants to sell us is that everything seemed to start with Christianity, this sense of freedom, religious freedom, has been there for a long, long time, long before Christ. So it's worth noting that this is part of the con. I have the information. I'm going to impart it to you because I am blessed, because I am JD Vance. And he goes on to say,
and the reason it's a Christian concept is very simple. Because Christianity, Imago Dei, the idea that we are all made in the image of our Creator, means that we must respect the free will of every single person. Now, part of that is you have a conversation with people. Having free will doesn't mean that you're not allowed to encourage somebody.
Now, the other thing that JD does, which I find rather disturbing, is that when he talks about some of these concepts, freedom of will, we all have the freedom to do and be whoever we want to be, all that sort of stuff. And when you look at things like the LGBTQI plus community and what the administration is doing that, when you look at wokeism and banning DEI and all the things that are abhorrent about Trumpism, and yet this man is expressing views which are saying the contrary. The question we need to be asking, given what he originally thought of Donald Trump, is he expressing views that are his views, or is he expressing a view which can be generally accepted by everybody, even though at the end of the day he'll do the complete opposite to that, and his administration is doing the complete opposite to those views that he is expressing here.
Talk to somebody about your faith, that you're not allowed to talk about certain values in school. When our founders talked about freedom of religion, they didn't mean you weren't allowed to say a Christian prayer in a public school or that you weren't allowed to talk about Jesus Christ in a public forum. They just meant that nobody could force you to profess the Christian faith. That had to come from your own free will. And I believe that, and I think every Christian who I've ever spoken to believes that the source is the Christian. The source of your faith, the Christian understanding, must be your own free will. But here's the thing about Christian values. There are a lot of Christian values out there that I think that we've just sort of assumed and we've in fact taken for granted. Christian values are the idea that you should respect every single person as an individual, whatever the color of their skin, created in the...
And one of the things that irritates me most about this sort of conversation is that I'm an atheist, and I believe in the things that JD is talking about. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. Sometimes it's just about being a decent human being. And to attach it to Christianity specifically is wrong, because it tends to exclude others, like myself, who hold the view that everybody is created equal, no matter who you are. That we must fight for a sense of equity and fairness in our world, something I try to do. And that the tying of it to a specific religious belief or adhering to a particular form of ideology is simply wrong. It is wrong. But this is what the right are attempting to do. And I guess, we can argue also that there are other religious beliefs. Radical Muslimism, for example, also does exactly the same sort of thing, decrying others who don't believe in their particular beliefs. But basically, we all should have the right to be able to believe in whatever we are believing in, providing that we don't act upon those beliefs that are going to damage or harm other people. It's actually quite simple, I think.
The image of God, that's a Christian concept. And in fact, it was a Christian empire, Great Britain, that abolished slavery to begin with. The idea that we should eliminate child sacrifice. What did the Christian settlers find when they came to the New World? They found a lot of civilizations that were murdering babies in weird religious rituals. It was Christianity that said we don't kill children just because they're somehow inconvenient to people.
Now, this is worth noting because it is here that JD wants to try and convince people that it was the Christians who arrived in Boston, I guess, who somehow, and those that followed, somehow put an end to Indigenous people of America engaged in some sort of killing of children. And this is totally untrue, totally untrue. In fact, one could argue that the devastation caused by colonialisation of the British throughout the centuries has caused the demise of many, many people, women and children in particular. And that this concept that somehow their Christian values dominated and controlled and exterminated these practices by the indigenous people of North America. So, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it's important for us to understand that there is no broad historical evidence that Indigenous peoples of North America engaged in widespread or systemic killing of their own children before European colonisations. Now, there's a couple of key points we need to understand about this, and that is that Native American societies were incredibly diverse, over 500 distinct tribes, each with its own customs and traditions. Just as today, practices varied based on region, environment, belief system, and social structures. And the same could say about the Indigenous people in Australia, for that matter. In most native cultures, children were deeply valued as future members of the tribe, and many societies practice collective caregiving. Extended families and community played strong roles in child rearing. So this notion that children didn't matter and children were exterminated is true. Rare and situational is the way we can best describe it. In some societies around the world, including Indigenous ones, infanticide occasionally occurred, but usually under extreme conditions such as famine, physical deformity, or resource scarcity. Not unique to Native Americans, though. Similar practices have been documented in many ancient and pre-modern societies, including Europe, Asia, and Australia, reflecting survival pressures rather than cultural endorsement of violence. Now, European colonisers often reported exaggerated or fabricated accounts of Indigenous practices, especially to justify conquest or portray native peoples as uncivilised. Many early colonial writings were propaganda that framed Indigenous cultures negatively to rationalise land theft and cultural suppression. And this is kind of what JD Vance is attempting to do. While isolated incidents of child killing may have occurred, as they have in most societies throughout history, there is no evidence of it being a cultural norm among Native American peoples before colonisation. In fact, many tribes had rich spiritual and social practices centred on protecting children and ensuring the survival of the community. So what JD Vance is talking about is crap. It's bullshit. And it's making it appear that Christianity saved the country from these native uncivilized individuals. And this is where I think JD Vance is so dangerous, is that he will say these things without really being informed of the facts, because the only fact that matters to him is the degree to which Christianity, in his view, plays a part in purifying a country. That is it. No further than that. Even though those sorts of notions are contradicted left, right and centre. They're just untrue. But people believe him because he is articulate, he is intelligent, he has a PhD, he's written a book, and he is an important figure. But at the end of the day, all he is a dressed-up con man. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, and also just let me know if there are other subjects that you'd like to have me raise and investigate and talk about. In the meantime, just take care.